Hi, and welcome to my channel. Or if you're a returning subscriber, hi again. It's so nice to see you back here for another video. My name's Teslark, and today I'm going to show you how you can create faux roses using real rose petals and leaves to make a really stunning epoxy resin trinket dish. As always, I'll have all the materials that I use for this project linked in the description below, so if anybody's curious, all of that information is going to be down there for you. It's also raining so hard in California right now. We've just been hit with like a series of storms, so I'm sorry if you guys can hear rain in the background. Let me know if you can hear it in the comments, or let me know if the audio is sounding pretty clean. And let's just hop into today's project. Our first step will be to process our flowers. So I picked up this really lovely bunch of spray roses from the grocery store, and I'm going to start to press the petals. And I'm using a microfloor today, which is a microwavable flower press. I really like pressing flowers this way because I can get my flowers dry really quickly, so I can craft with them the same day. I also think that because the press works so quickly, you maintain a lot of the color from your original flowers. And the reason that I'm using spray roses is because they're much smaller, so after I've pressed my petals and assembled my little faux flowers, they're going to fit in the mold a lot better than if I were to use a standard rose. So for this process, I went ahead and I cut one of the roses off of the stem, and then I'm just taking the petals and arranging those flat onto one side of my microwavable flower press. And this process actually goes a lot faster if you just kind of pop all of the petals off instead of pulling them off one by one. But make sure to reserve the center of your roses because we'll be pressing those later to use in our faux flowers. When you're setting your petals into the press, make sure that you leave a little bit of space in between them, because if they do touch each other during the drying process, they'll get stuck to each other and you won't really be able to use them. You also want to make sure you get a variety of both smaller and larger petals, because you're going to want some larger petals on the outside of your flowers and smaller petals in the center. Now that the press is full, let's go ahead and put the top on, and then we'll pop it into the microwave and begin to dry our flowers. And I would like to remind you guys that if you are liking this video so far, please don't forget to give it a like. It not only helps out my channel a whole lot, but it also lets me know that I'm making content that you guys want to see from me. When you're using a microwavable flower press, it's best to start with the highest amount of time and then work your way down from that as your flowers get more dry. I found that putting them in for about 30 seconds for the first couple of times and then dropping it down to about 15 seconds or even 10 seconds works pretty well for me. But in between, I do like to check them, see how they're looking. You can see here that there's some that's stuck to the other side, which tells me that these aren't fully dry, so back into the microwave they go. It's a bit of a tedious process as you do have to kind of babysit the flowers, but it's really nice because you can have flowers that are ready to use in about 3 to 5 minutes. And if you guys would like me to make a video specifically on how to use a microfloor or a microwavable flower press, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to show you. And also let me know about your favorite ways to press flowers in the comments. I really love learning from you guys as well. Now that I've got a good amount of petals, I'm going to press the center of my roses to use in the center of my faux roses. So I'm just removing all of the greenery from the outside edges there, and then I'm going to cut the bulb off enough so that it can lay a little bit more flat, but not too much that it completely falls apart. And I think for this project I want to do about 3 flowers, so I'll be using 3 centers of these roses. And the reason why I didn't press them at the same time as pressing the petals is because they're much thicker, so it's going to take a lot more time for them to dry. However, I will be adding some leaves and greenery to this batch as well, and I'll just keep an eye on it and pull the leaves out when they're ready. As a typical rule of thumb, the larger your flower is, or the more moisture content it has, or the thicker it is, the longer it's going to take to dry. And you can definitely over dry your flowers and your botanicals and burn them, turn them completely brown, which is really a bummer. So make sure that you're checking your pieces as they're drying. Now that we have all of our flower components dry and ready to use, let's go ahead and begin to assemble our faux flowers. So you can see here there's the little center of my flowers, and I'm just putting everything on the same plate so that it's easy to work with. And to glue my flowers together, I'll be using a little bit of Mod Podge, so I'm just going to pour a little bit of that into a very small cup. Next, I'll use a small paintbrush to paint on a little bit of that Mod Podge onto one of the edges of my flower. or my flower petal, I should say. And as you can see here, some of the petals sort of split as they were drying, and I have a feeling it's because they're so small, or maybe because I left them in too long. So I'm just going to make sure that any little splits in the petals I'm covering with another petal. So I've attached my second petal onto the first one, and then I'm going to just repeat that process, adding a little bit more Mod Podge to the corner there and adding another petal. And for these flowers, I'm going to be making them in 2 different layers. So I'm thinking for the first base layer, I want to have either 4 or 5 petals, and then for the inside layer, I'm going to do either 3 or 4. So you can see here where there's like 2 little gaps and 2 little cracks. So I'm just going to make sure that I get another petal here that covers both of those nicely. So now that I've got my first layer of petals down, I'm going to start again in the center and add some smaller petals. You want to make sure that you add smaller petals in the center so they don't overlap and take over the larger petals on the outside. And this is a great time to remind you to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It's a great way that you can show support for this channel and help it grow. It is so nice seeing this community that we're slowly building over here with creative and curious people. So hit that subscribe button so you'll be notified every time I post. Once I have 2 layers of petals down and I'm happy with how the flower's looking, I'm going to go ahead and attach the center of my rose into the center of the flower here. So again, using a little bit of Mod Podge and a pair of tweezers just to place that right in the center. And I'm also going to very carefully move this so that it doesn't dry and glue itself down to the wax paper. And then I'll repeat that process and make as many flowers as I want for whichever particular project I'm working on. And then next, let's go ahead and set up our mold. So I like to store my molds in the bags that they came in or in plastic baggies just to keep some dust and pet hair out of them. But I also often will take a piece of duct tape like you can see here and really use that to get into all those cracks and crevices and make sure that there's no dust or pet hair or any particles of anything stuck in my mold that will end up in the finished piece. I'd also like to give this trinket tray a gold border, so I'm using some mica powder by Arteza. It's their Aztec Gold, and I'm going to go ahead and use a paintbrush and paint that into the mold where I want the gold border to be. Normally when I add a gold border to my pieces, I will do it after they're cured and then I'll use a paint pen. I've got several videos here on YouTube where I do that exact technique, which I'll make sure to link a couple of those in the description as well, so you can check those out after you're done with this video. But sometimes it's fun to play with new techniques, and so I wanted to try it this way instead. So I'm just using my paintbrush to try my best to get a nice even coat of that mica powder right on the innermost part of that edge, which is going to end up being the rim around the outside of my trinket dish. And the powder does kind of pop up a little bit, so I'm hoping it doesn't spread too far throughout the piece, but we will have to wait and see. After I've got my border painted, I'm just going to use another piece of duct tape again to get rid of any of that mica powder that may have spread to the surface of my tray. And because we're working with flowers, I'm going to be pouring my resin in layers because I don't want the flowers to float. So I went ahead and I mixed up 100 milliliters of clear resin to start, and I just mixed up 50 milliliters of resin with 50 milliliters of hardener, let that sit for a bit, and now I'm hitting it with my heat gun to pop any bubbles that are forming on the surface of my resin. My next step will be to add some gold leaf to my resin, and I recently made a commissioned set of coasters using flowers and greenery and gold leaf, and I thought they turned out really pretty, so I wanted to kind of try it again, but as a tray, and assemble some faux roses. But I actually did film that video as well, so I'll make sure to link that as well if you're curious, and you can check that out when you're done with this video. So a little bit of the gold leaf goes a long way. I don't want it to overtake the piece or make it so you can't really see the flowers. So I've just taken a little bit of gold leaf and crushed that up in my fingers, and I'm going to thoroughly mix that throughout my resin. And after another quick hit from the heat gun, it's time to start pouring that resin into my mold. And like I said earlier, I will be pouring this in layers as I don't want my flowers to float. So this tray typically holds about 150 milliliters, but I'm pouring just 100 milliliters of resin to start. Now that I have my first layer of resin poured, it's time to start layering in my botanicals. So first I'm taking a little bit of this resin and just getting that flower wet, and I'm doing this for a couple of reasons. The first reason being that I want it to sort of secure the petals together, and I'm hoping that this is going to minimize any air bubbles that might pop up when I'm adding my flowers to the resin. So just getting a nice clear coat on that first flower, and then I'm going to add it to my tray facing down away from me. The reason I'm placing the flowers down facing away from me is that when the resin is cured and I pop this out of the mold, the part that you see facing up towards us right now is actually going to be the bottom of the mold. So I'm placing these upside down or away from me so that when I take them out of the mold, you'll see the right side of the flower. And I'm also going to keep that in mind as I layer in my botanicals. For example, if I was going to be building this up to where this side was going to be facing up in the finished product, I would start by layering my greenery and then adding my flowers. But because I want the flowers to be the central focus and then have kind of greenery poking out from around the edges, I've layered my flowers in first, and now I'm just going around and adding some of my leaves. Once I'm happy with the composition of my flowers and the leaves, and I'm happy with how the tray is looking, I'm going to go ahead and hit this with my heat gun one more time to pop any bubbles that may be forming, and then I'll cover it up and let this layer cure completely, so about 12 to 24 hours. So we're time traveling a little bit here, but I've got another batch of resin mixed up, and I mixed up another 100 milliliters just to make sure that I've got enough resin because I would hate to have to mix more up later. And I'm adding a bit more gold leaf to that. Also, there's kids outside playing in the yard, and so if you can hear them screaming in the background, I'm very sorry. It's definitely a joyous sound, but it might be a little bit jarring. But you know, it is what it is. I'm making this voiceover the day before this video is supposed to go up, so I'm just doing what I can, and I hope you guys don't mind. Leave me a comment if you can hear them, and leave me a comment if you can't. Now that I've got my gold leaf added, I'm once again going to mix that throughout my resin to make sure that it's thoroughly and evenly incorporated throughout the resin before pouring it into my mold. And I'm just going to make sure that that mold is completely filled, and then hit it with my heat gun to pop any bubbles, and I'll cover this up one more time and allow it to cure completely. Alright, so I went ahead and I let my piece set up overnight, so it's nice and cured. Totally solid. So let's go ahead and pop it out of the mold and see how it turned out. It's looking really pretty from the back, and I can't wait to see what it turned out like. Beautiful. As you can see, we've got this nice gold border around the edge, and it's looking really great. The flowers are so pretty in there, and I'll definitely make sure to take some footage of this guy in the natural light so you can see it a little bit better, but it is really, really stunning. I did get one large air bubble in here, which is a really big bummer, but it is on that second layer, so it's totally sealed in there. It's a bummer, but sometimes that happens. Overall, I'm super happy with this piece. As always, thank you so much for watching this video, especially if you made it all the way to the end. And if you did make it all the way to the end of this video, leave me some sort of flower emoji just so that I know that you made it. I really hope that this video inspires you to make something of your own today, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!